Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brendan, and today we need to talk about the final squeeze of Bitcoin. And the truth of the matter is, it's not just Bitcoin. Bitcoin is seeing an exceptionally large squeeze right now, but so is a lot of the altcoins. So today we're going to be taking a look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, Chainlink, Uniswap, Polygon Matic, and how nearly everything inside of cryptocurrency is seeing a really large squeeze. Now, the second half of this video, I want to talk about what can happen as a result of this squeeze. Is it going to be a break downwards? Is it going to be a break upwards? How are the inflation numbers that we just got going to affect Bitcoin and all of crypto's price? Well, those are all talking points for today's video, so if that does sound interesting, make sure you stick around for the entire length of the video, as there will be important information discussed the entire way through. But that being said, let's go ahead and begin by diving into Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, one of the reoccurring themes and patterns that we have been looking at is the collection of this descending triangle alongside this horizontal parallel channel, or this neutral parallel channel as some people like to call it. And so when we're looking at this descending triangle, I'm just going to get rid of the initial resistance of that parallel channel so that we can see this just a little bit more clearly. But we have this very clear level of resistance where Bitcoin is seeing lower swing highs pretty consistently. So we're seeing lower swing high, more lower swing highs. And just recently, we touched this last support and resistance level almost back to back. So we saw a final touch point of support. And I want to really zoom in because that's what the portion of today's video is going to be at. And the big thing here, the big takeaway is that we have been moving from this resistance to support, back to resistance, back to support, back to resistance, back to support, back to resistance, back to support, now back to resistance, which is where we are currently sitting at. And so as we can see, there's not much room left inside of this descending triangle. There's not much room left inside of this formation, and all the pressure that we've seen over here is all being forced into the final little quadrant that we have, and price is squeezing at an astronomical level right now. And so when something like this happens, what we will most likely see is a very large volatile breakout or breakdown, meaning all this pressure is going to be flown into a large burst of a move that obviously has to either go up or down. But the big thing here is that there's going to be a volatile move coming, I would say most likely within the next week or two, because there isn't much room left for Bitcoin to move inside of here. In fact, to be fully honest and clear, I didn't think Bitcoin would do a back-to-back touch of support up to resistance again, just like it did over the last 2 days. So this is quite the squeeze that we're seeing on Bitcoin through a descending triangle. And if we go all the way back to what we were talking about earlier with this horizontal support, then and if we even remove the resistance line of that descending triangle, then what we have here is a very nice neutral parallel channel. So if resistance is able to break on a typically normal formation, or a typically normally bearish formation, being that descending triangle, which tends to break downwards more often than it breaks upwards, but if that resistance does break, the two levels that I'm looking for on Bitcoin are going right back up to its previous support, now turn resistance, and the level around, I'd say 22,500, because this is also a previous support, or previous support turned into resistance as well. So what we have is we have the first secondary form of resistance, which is going to be around 22,500. Then primary resistance, if we can break upwards out of the descending triangle towards the top of this channel, is going to be closer to around $25,000. Now, all of this is really just an if-then scenario, saying if resistance breaks, then we will likely move back up inside of this channel up to here, closer to 25,000 most likely. If support breaks and the descending triangle plays out, it's very, very likely that we see a new low of year and probably another 10, 20, maybe even a 25% drop in Bitcoin. But we're yet to see that. And the big argument here is that crypto is so low at the moment that doesn't even have room for another 10 to 20, 25% drop. And I think that the lower that price gets, the less likely large assets are to have extremely volatile moves to the downside. And that's just the nature of the bear market, especially when something's already down 70 to 80%. Now, one of the unique things before we move on to a couple of the other examples is that Bitcoin has actually been outpacing and outperforming major indices in the last 3 weeks, meaning that Bitcoin has been outperforming NASDAQ, S&P 500, and Dow Jones over the last 3 weeks. And so what I want to do here is I want to zoom out and show everyone that from our yearly lows, Bitcoin and Ethereum are both up at least 10%. In this case, Bitcoin's up about 10.5% from its yearly low. And if we want to go ahead and look at the other major crypto, Ethereum, then we can see that Ethereum is up about 50% from its yearly low. Now, when we look at this, we can also see that Bitcoin has not hit a new yearly low since June of this year, since June of 2022. But if we go and we look at major indices like NASDAQ, for example, NASDAQ just hit a new yearly low, this week. In fact, NASDAQ is bordering multi-year lows because the last time that NASDAQ tested this level of around 10,500 was all the way back in July of 2020. It was around July 2020, which is a pretty wild thing to see. So NASDAQ just had multi-year lows, which Bitcoin has not seen yet. The other one was ES. And if we go ahead and we take a look at ES, ES just hit multi-year lows, which Bitcoin, again, it hit multi-year lows this week. That's not something that Bitcoin's done. Bitcoin hasn't hit lows a new low since around June, July of this year. And this week we have ES, NASDAQ, and Dow Jones as well, which are all seeing new yearly lows, new multi-year lows. So it's cool to see Bitcoin outperforming all of these, and where Bitcoin is up 10%, about 10.5% from its yearly lows, what we have is the S&P 500's up barely, not even 4% from its yearly lows. So crypto has been outpacing traditionals for the past couple of weeks, and I think that's a bit of a breath of fresh air to see that we don't have to be dead correlated to a lot of these other traditional assets. Now, if we're going and we're looking at something like Uniswap is a great example, then what we can see is that this guy is squeezing inside of a large symmetrical triangle. And so what we have is ourselves moving from resistance to support, back up, back and forth, and this thing's squeezing in its final quadrant. So there's big squeezes on altcoins as well. If we're going and we're looking at Matic, what we see is that Matic is actually in the middle of a falling channel, which not a lot of other formations are in at the moment. And so with Matic, if we zoom in just a little bit, this one is beginning to see, I wouldn't say quite as pressing of a squeeze as Bitcoin or Uniswap, but it's starting to see this as well, because something can only stay in the channel for so long, and we've already gone from support to resistance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now almost 6 times. And now we are preparing to say, okay, is this going to be the breakout? Because typically falling channels are a bullish formation. So it's something that I am actively looking at on Matic. And if we go and we look at Chainlink, it's another great example of a squeeze where we have a climbing level of support, which we just touched yet again. In fact, the inflation numbers that we saw from yesterday and the dump that they caused Link and Uniswap and Bitcoin all to go perfectly down to their support level to give everyone one of the best areas of entry possible. And it was a really unique opportunity, and anyone that had an order over here to fill its support, even if you had a stop loss at a new swing low, your stops would not have hit for Bitcoin, Uniswap, or Chainlink. And so there's a unique opportunity here, and as support is climbing and as resistance is staying stable right here and right here, with primary resistance on Chainlink around $9.68 and secondary resistance around $8.20, support is climbing and resistance is staying flat, which will eventually make the squeeze tighter. So there's big squeezes on a lot of major cryptocurrencies, and it's just one of those things to watch out for as we head into the second half of October. In fact, there's articles coming up and popping up everywhere because Bitcoin is seriously erasing all of its losses after the inflation reading. So what this means is that with inflation coming in at an 8.1 expected and an 8.2 reality, everything kind of dumped off of that news. Everything saw the big sell-off, and that's where we get these big wicks on our candle chart, the big wicks to the downside. And what we saw is that after the initial reaction, everything started rapidly recovering, which is a little bit quite odd, but I don't think anyone's going to complain that the markets are recovering. Now, in a little bit of news, everyone knows I love being able to talk about the news in crypto. I think the fundamentals and the technicals should go hand in hand with one another. And although there wasn't a lot of news ending out the end of this week, we have seen a lot of news the past couple of weeks. So maybe it was due that we had just a little bit of a breather here. But what we have is the world's largest stablecoin issuer Thursday said that it had moved all of its commercial holdings into US Treasury. And so what we see is that stablecoin is essentially trading their commercial paper holdings for US Treasuries. And this seems to have a bit of a mixed reaction. You have people that are all on board with this and they like the idea of it, but then you have a lot of people that are probably very skeptical of this and saying, why in the world would you want to get into US Treasuries, especially if you are a stablecoin for cryptocurrency, which we have to remember that they're tied to the US dollar. So gaining US Treasuries, while some people might disagree with it, it makes sense to a degree because they are meant to represent the US dollar and they have to have a tying to the US economy in some sort of manner. So I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts on this one? Are you even a fan of Tether? Do you think that this could be a good move for Tether in the long term, or do you think that this is going to be one of those things that we're making a video on 6 months to a year from now saying this is where it all went wrong for Tether? Because I'm sure that there's people who do believe that out there, and justifiably so, because Tether's had a lot of, I think, shady articles and a bit of a shady past. They seem to have pulled it all together now, but people could just be saying that this is going to contribute to the shadiness potentially. So let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. I hope all of you did enjoy this video today, a little bit of a shorter one, but there still is a lot happening in the markets. And I think the main point of today's video was prepare, have a plan, trade your plan your trade, all that good stuff. There's a big saying over here, and I kind of butchered it, but one of my coworkers, Bryce, says, plan your trade and trade your plan. He always says that. It's one of my favorite quotes by him. And it reigns true here. So if you have a plan, stick to that plan, and you can't really get lost in the craziness and the volatility. But, happy crypto, happy trading, everyone. I hope you all enjoy the weekend. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, as it does help out the channel a lot. And if you want to get more content like this one and get early access to a lot of it, make sure you stick around and go to the description down below and join the link for Crypt Nation. I'm one of the analysts over there, and I give all of my analysis early and in more depth every single week. So if that interests you and you're curious, feel free to join that. And if not, I still am very appreciative that everyone is able to come around on the channel. So thank you all for watching, and see all of you next week.